What are the key obstacles to value-driven leadership?
Well, there are many of them. So what we do in our programs is we look at two big influences. The first one is basically yourself. You're one of the big obstacles. And that's not because you want to, but that's how nature has shaped us, how our brain works, the kind of biases that we have, the tendencies that we have in terms of following the path of least resistance whenever we can. That's the path we take, and that's also how we can create team cultures which may not perform effectively. And a second big influence is, of course, the situation, the context. We're very much influenced by how words frame certain things, try to take a moral dimension out of the context so people don't see the challenge itself, peer pressure, all our own desires of being liked, trying to belong. All these forces, they actually, who are very important to us as social beings, they can all derail us from actually our values, making that our behaviors are not always in line with our values. And that's, of course, when the problems occur.
Are organizations interested in value-driven leadership, and if so, why?
I would say most organizations today, yes, they're interested in value-driven leadership. The motives may differ, however. So this is what I call an institutionalized focus on value-driven leadership, is because partly it's in the law. We have to be responsible corporations. We have to work on the long term. We have to change our bonus systems that are more sustainable in the long term. So from one point of view, it's institutionalized, which makes it actually for the observer, usually the customer or other stakeholders, more difficult to really distinguish whether it's really intrinsically valued or whether it's more extrinsically valued. So I think that's one big challenge in the corporate world. But you do have a lot of companies who are intrinsically motivated, I would say, due to the fact that the products they sell, the way they do business. So, and I tend to see more and more in our consultancy work as well that more and more organizations are starting to realize that when you have shared values that are clearly communicated and people can embrace it, basically the effectiveness goes up of a company as well. It's in that sense, it creates trust in that indirect sense that it creates a culture where people will be much more willing to do something extra.
Is the use of law not more effective than having value-driven leaders?
It's a very good question, because from a rational point of view where we would say, hey, we're all rational people, we have information, we know what to do. So why do you need leaders if we can actually put it out there in rules? But more and more research actually shows that the more rules we have, the less compliance we get. So there's a bit of a problem with only using the law and only using rules. So this, I'm not saying here we can't use the law. What I'm saying is we have the law, but only the law creates a culture where people don't think anymore, because the law is the guideline. But laws are reactive, meaning a law quite often is developed when something goes wrong. We don't have laws for everything that may happen in the future. We also need employees who can think for themselves and understand the values of an organization and why we have these values to act upon it. So it's not a story of law or leadership, it's a story of law and leadership.
What are the key characteristics of a value-driven leader?
Value-driven leaders, they know their purpose, they know their passion, and they know their good passions. I mean, a lot of us have passions, but some of them, we're really bad at it, but still we're passionate about it. Value-driven leaders also know this is not what they have to strive for. They strive for the values. They value the things they're really good at, and they know why. So that is finding purpose. When you have purpose, you can find meaning in the things you do. Finding meaning means you're much more motivated. You're much more able to embody what you value, and people will see that. This is important as a leader to bring into work climates in your team, that people know what you stand for, why you stand for it, because that's communication. And they may challenge you, but at least you have a stand on this. If you don't have values, you stand for nothing, you fall for everything. So it's a clear guideline for yourself, plus also the self-reflective and developmental aspect of leaders for themselves is extremely important, because we always say it's lonely at the top. But at one point, you need to understand why you're there. It's giving that sense of meaning.